Everybody got quiet. I guess you're no longer talking among yourselves. Should I just go ahead and start?
Sure.
Well, when the room gets quiet, something's supposed to happen. So anyway, I'm Marshall Breeding. I hope you've heard of me before. I don't know. I'm delighted to be here, though. I've had the opportunity to speak at multiple KohaCon conferences, both the US and international ones. And, I just find this such an interesting and important community that I'm delighted to have the chance to interact with all of you. So it's great to be in Providence, very interesting city to have a conference in. And so it's been fun to be back here again. So I'm going to ramble for the next hour to talk about some of my observations of you cannot hear me. Let me move this closer. Okay, is that better? Thanks for speaking up. Now you can hear me better.
Hey,
Okay.
actually, I could give Marshall an introduction. I meant to, and then we stumbled into it. This is Marshall Breeding, our keynote speaker. I tried to explain to my wife over the weekend who Marshall is, and it got kind of hard because you're Marshall Breeding. Everybody knows who Marshall is. Marshall runs librarytechnology.org. Yeah, right? All right.
Mm-hmm. Also known as Library Technology Guides.
Yeah. Everything's a website now. But it is, I'm going to describe it poorly. It's a collection of data about which libraries use which ILSs and what features each ILS has. It's very much a Bible for like what software is out there for libraries and how it works and what you should think about, and pretty invaluable. You are all probably here because you've been involved in a migration at some point, or like have shopped around for ILSs at some point. And I can't imagine you didn't at some point in there use Marshall's data. So yeah, I'm thrilled to have him as a friend of koha-US here to talk about the role of Koha in history in the ILS marketplace.
Yeah.
That was my message introduction. Goodbye.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Well, so in addition to running the website, which actually consumes a part of my day every day, I do speaking, writing, consulting, and lots of other things that all kind of revolve around the concept of library technology in sometimes loose kind of ways. But yeah, that's what I do. I'm not an expert in a lot of things, but this little niche of library technology I've been working in since maybe a lot of you were born, about 1985. So it's good to, I like to see the history of things, how they play out over time. I'd like to do projects over time where you kind of see how things are moving one year to the next, to the next, to the next, and can kind of go back and see the trends that led us to where we are today. And that helps me kind of think about where things might be going in future years. So I'm kind of immersed in this field and maybe kind of a unique way. So, Koha has been around for 25 years. So it began in 1999/2000. So that's a decade or so after I've been following the automation field. So it was also interesting to see kind of what led up to the emergence of Koha. Here are some, I like the stories, I like the people that have to do with all of these different products and technologies. So I know there'll be kind of more conversation later about the history of Koha, but I'll give you a couple of tidbits from my perspective. So in 1999, or go back to the mid-early 1990s, the Horowhenua libraries had implemented this ILS called C2 from Contact Technologies, Catalyst was the name at the time. Not to be confused with Catalyst with a Y, which is a company that supports Koha in Australia and New Zealand. But Catalyst was the system that they had, and it wasn't compliant with the year 2000. So rather than work to fix that, they wanted something new and different. So they commissioned Katipo Communications Group to write a system for them. So Rosalind Blake was the kind of head of the Horowhenua Trust. Joanne Ransom, I think, was head of the library, maybe vice versa. I met Joanne a few times. I don't remember if I met Rosalie. She died a few years ago. I think it's cut off at 2021, I think. And then Rachel Hamilton Williams was the owner of Katipo Communications. And Chris, how many of you know Chris? You should all know Chris. Was kind of the lead programmer of the project and has continued to be involved in the development of koha, though his company Catalyst does lots of other things too. And there was a period where he was doing other things besides koha, and I think even still he might be, but he is kind of the global guru and leader, I would say, of koha, at least in the early days. So the Horowhenua Trust is a group of like 3 or 4 really small libraries. And so the initial version of koha is nothing like what you see today. It didn't support MARC. It was just kind of a fielded database. And so it took it a while, and it was the one that actually got momentum behind it so that it did get developed and incrementally improved over time. Remember this article I wrote in about 2002, might have been, was talking about open source for libraries. And I think my conclusion is it's not going to happen real soon. And I mentioned koha and Avanti and a couple of other open source ILSs that were kind of emerging at that time. And of the 5 that I mentioned in that article, 1 actually survived. And 1 actually came to be the dominant, well, I don't want to say dominant, the most implemented integrated library system in the world. This is self-quoting, but I just a couple of things I wanted to point out is that, it's the most widely implemented. And how many implementations are there? I have no earthly idea, but there are at least 10 or 20,000 because it is the kind of default automation system in countries like India, where tons of small libraries download it, implement it themselves because they have more talent than money. So, they download it and launch it and make it work. In Latin America, it's used all over, and some whole countries have implemented it. Turkey, it's used in every public library. So in addition to kind of the officially supported libraries using koha that I can kind of count, I know that there are many, many thousands that I can't count. So I would like to be able to count them. So if there was ever a way to kind of get more data about what libraries are using koha, I would like to. I know there's also a tool that the koha community has that does that as well, but its numbers even lower than mine. So I like to quantify things, so I would like to be able to do that. So there was a time, especially early on, where clearly you were getting less with koha than you were getting from commercial systems. I would say that's not true anymore. That given this 25 years of incremental development, the gap between proprietary systems and koha and Evergreen as open source systems has narrowed incredibly. And in some cases, koha has more features and capability than commercial alternatives. So it's been interesting to see that progress over this 25 years of development. And the implementation numbers have gone up accordingly. The ones that I can count, especially the ones in the United States, Canada, Australia, UK, and so forth, where I have a really good handle on what libraries are using it, the numbers are going up. We'll look at those later. So there's other stories to tell. So there may be a quiz on the, I don't know if they'll have this question, but Nelsonville Public Library, part of the Athens County library system in Ohio, was the first one to kind of take the plunge and implement koha in especially the United States. There may have been one in Canada. No, I think this first one. And that was a bold move at that time. As they were working on deciding to implement koha, one of the things they said that we've got to have that it doesn't is MARC. So a lot of concerted effort went into kind of getting what we consider the basics now, but more and more the foundation of what it takes to have a full-featured ILS. A lot of that happened in the 2002 to 2005 timeframe. So there's LibLime. They were the first official support company for koha in the US. Joshua Ferraro was the fellow behind that. And they got a lot of momentum at that time. They kind of ponied up and paid a lot of development and hired folks like Nicole Ingard and other really great folks that were involved in the koha community in those mid-early 2000s. They even acquired the koha assets from Capito Communications. And so Chris came over for a minute, wasn't really happy with the way things went, and then he went to Catalyst eventually. But so in the 2007 timeframe, they were kind of the main commercial company behind koha. But then things happened. One of the things that is important about koha are the values of community, open source, collaboration, and they had this idea of LibLime Enterprise koha, which would be a private version of koha that would be available only to their customers. So that wasn't really true to the open source community at that time. And you can see that things didn't go especially well. And then they were acquired by a company called PTFS, Progressive Federal Technology something. They're still around. And, they already were supporting koha. So they folded all of their customers into LibLime koha, and they have virtual, and that didn't go so well when you look at the koha aspect of things. Don't want to say bad things about the company itself because it offers good products and services in the federal sector, but they're no longer a big player in the rest of it. I think that I'll show a slide later that shows that they lost almost all of the koha business in public and academic libraries in the US because it just didn't resonate as a good arrangement anymore. If you want koha, you want true community open source, and you weren't getting that from LibLime. More things to say about that I won't. So eventually, LibLime Enterprise koha morphed into Bibliovation, which they state is not open source, is not based on koha. It's not open source, but maybe it's based on koha. And very few implementations of those remain. They have a big contract for MWR. These are the public libraries associated with military bases. There are about 300 or 400 of those. I think that's most of their koha, their Bibliovation business now. So you got to stay true to the mission if you want to survive in the open source arena. I think that's a big lesson learned, I think. And then in 2009, this other company called Bywater, anybody heard of them? So they began in 2009, and so they've been in business for, well, that's 15 years, right? Which can't do math in my head. And so it's been amazing to watch, that company start from kind of saying, we've got a website, we're official koha support company, to being the one that has, a very large part of the koha support business in the US. The important thing to think about is that koha is something you can't charge for. So when you write your business plan, you can't write, oh yeah, we're going to collect this much revenue in license fees, because you can't do that. It's a services-based economy. So you pay for services, for hosting, for development, for support. And that is a different model than the proprietary companies, which charge for licensing of the software, exclusive licensing. You can't buy their software from anybody else or support for their software anywhere else. And so it's viable, yes, they have a large number of customers, but it's not the open source approach. And I think that part of the thinking in the open source community is that we can use our software, even if we don't like our vendor anymore, we can get another one, we can do it ourselves. So I think that puts a lot of motivation on the support providers to do a great job, because you don't have to have them. You might have to change your hosting arrangement, but you can keep your software. And that, I think, is a lot of the reason for the success of Koha. So it's a values-based environment where it's deeply collaborative. You depend on your vendor, you depend on other libraries, you depend on kind of the global community to make sure that the system that you're using is not only great today, but it'll be viable 5-10 years from now. And then the community, I mean, I don't have to tell you about community. You guys came from all over the country to come here today to see your other colleagues about this technology that all of you have in your libraries. So it's a values-based or environment, ecosystem, however you want to characterize it. I guess I jumped ahead. It's the business of open source is, I would say it doesn't disallow commercial involvement, encourages commercial involvement, because no individual library would have the resources to build the next feature, to manage the hosting, manage the other things involved in keeping a complex integrated library system operating for any individual library. So commercial players are important in all aspects of open source. When you look at things like Linux, who's doing most of the development? Big tech companies. So they can't charge for the license, but they benefit from it. And there's communities around all of the different open source platforms, components, and systems like Koha. So yeah, you pay for services. The software is yours for the taking. And it's also possible, less than in the US than other places, to just do it yourself. You can go to GitHub, you can spin out your version of Koha, put it on your server and host it without ever asking anybody's permission or paying anybody. But it's hard work. It takes a lot of technical expertise. So the other trend going on in libraries is there are fewer technical folks in public academic and school libraries. You're really dependent on kind of professional services to do more and more technology. So the idea of that, a general public library or academic library in the US doing it themselves, isn't sustainable, I don't think. There may be isolated pockets of it, but it's like this kind of scenario where, we really had this good tech guy that he set it up for us and it was working really well. And then he graduated and we haven't seen him since and we don't know what to do. So, having someone you can count on through either professional services or, long-term hired staff members or something is essential if you're going to use open source as your key business application in your library. Yeah. Somebody mentioned library technology guides. So I've been doing library technology guides. I think I launched it in about the same time Koha started. I started building the code base in the mid-1990s. So library technology guides is a couple of things. It's a way that I provide data about what I learn about libraries to the rest of the world. It's also a way that, I kind of keep my hands involved in technology day to day. I wrote every line of code behind the website. I built a content management system in the mid to early 1990s. It was using a database then called DB TextWorks, which worked kind of well. It was a proprietary database, but eventually it didn't work so well, and I started using MySQL instead, and that worked a lot better. So it's the typical stack of MySQL, Perl. I don't use Linux, I use Windows. Don't hiss. But it works really well for me because, as a one-person development support shop, I need something that I know really well in order to be able to do. So I continue to write lines of Perl kind of every day. So, I develop content, I gather data, I write code, and that has kind of led, library technology guides to be kind of the main place where I think libraries go to find out about technologies used in libraries. There were others at one point. There was this website called LibWeb where you could find any library's website. There was another one called WebCats, where you could find their library catalogs. So I want all of that in one place. And so that skeleton of data has kind of expanded and expanded to cover integrated library systems, discovery systems, interlibrary loan systems, digital library management systems. I probably cover like 15 different categories of technology products, though ILS and discovery are the ones that are most comprehensively covered. I'm working on the others. So it's a collaborative effort too, except 99% of the collaboration is me and 2% are the libraries that submit data. So I'm trying to rebalance that. So I just don't know what I can do or say in order to get more folks to pay attention to contributing data about the technologies that they use to my website so that all of us know. And so that's shared information, but it's tough. There are about 200,000 entries in the library database now. A lot of them are school libraries. I mean, there are 100,000 school libraries in the US. So I have, I take public data and be able to expand that in my database and and layer the automation stuff on top of that. But about 100,000 that I cover that are libraries using automation systems, more places. So this is a project I've talked about a little bit recently, is that how many of you have noticed kind of the swarms of bot traffic that are attacking every website in the world? Nate's noticed that. Galen's noticed that, everybody. So I was noticing that, I would get swarms of tens of thousands of page requests in a 5-minute period. From given things, whereas the normal is a few hundred page requests, and those were the big peaks. And fortunately, my website didn't crash, but it certainly wasn't being speedy. And even the normal amount of traffic that was additive from the AI bots and others was a really big problem. So last week, I finally got around to doing something about it, and I wrote this what I call an application level firewall, where I'm examining each page request before it's served in order to be able to filter out the bots. So you can see here what a typical moment looks like, where there were, 5 normal requests and a bunch of blocked ones and a few authorized bots. So it has been a night and day difference to be able to kind of get control of who uses the website. And I know that Bywater and lots of others are using Cloudflare to be able to address that problem. I'm kind of a DIY kind of guy, so that's what I did. So at any point you can press the button and say, okay, what's going on today or previous days based on the new logs? And 73% of pages actually get served, but I'm cutting out at 25%. And this isn't during one of the swarms. When the swarms come, it could be 95% bot traffic you don't want. So, just a side note. The other thing I do is I collect IP addresses, taking names. So if you are attacking my website in the block category. I'm counting you, and the one who gets the most loses because they will go into my firewall and my network firewall, and they won't be able to come back. So it's kind of this ongoing strategy to be able to manage that. And that's just a diversion to say that, yeah, I'm kind of involved in the technical side of things too. But back to the real topic, is how I use my website in order to be able to tell the world about the data that I've collected about what automation systems libraries are using. And so here are the koha libraries in the US. There are a few of them. There are a lot of them. Every state is represented except where's Wyoming? When I put up this slide, I even double checked to see if I had any clue of any libraries using koha in Wyoming. So yeah, who knows? Hawaii and Alaska aren't shown on the map, but they certainly have koha going on. So yeah, but it's important to kind of visualize the impact of the system that you're using. So these maps do that. So is there a prize? No, but if anyone can find a library in Wyoming that's using koha, you get.
They have a statewide shared catalog running sorts of guidance.
That's right. And but there are lots of other libraries, school libraries and others that aren't part of that. The wild catalog is what you're talking about. But for whatever reason, usually there's a school or a museum or something that will be using koha. Not in Wyoming, apparently.
Okay.
Globally, of course. And the thing that this map doesn't do a good job of is capturing all of the library. It has a few in India, but this should be solid because there are tens, I would say 10,000 libraries in India using koha. And in the developing world, I'm not sure that, what the proper term to use these days, kind of the less wealthy countries tend to be in the global south. Characteristic of that is that every library is left on their own to automate or not. So even within a university, there may be a dozen or 24 different separately managed libraries. So things aren't centralized, they're all kind of done themselves in a room full of books, set up koha. So a lot of that happens. So you see that in Latin America, you see that in India, you see it other places. It's the wealthier nations that have large library systems, have library consortia, have money to pay for services, and so forth. So most of the economic value, if you want to put it in that terms, of koha happens in those countries. Public and academic. I would say those that have a lot of money and those that are in the red, I don't know. It's public academic. Okay, so there's a lot of koha implementations in the world. This is, since we're koha-US, I think it's fair game to say that I can limit the US. And so what kind of libraries are using koha in the US? And I could also do it, I know that Equinox and others support koha, but the largest numbers are by water. So for simplicity, I pulled out the charts from that, and you can see that this is today. Why is this one bigger? I didn't mean it to be. 58% are public, 17 academic, 14 other, and so forth. So you can see it's lots of different types of libraries, though publics are the most. Okay, this is by library size. For whatever reason, the heading didn't show up. So how big of a library do you need to be, or are you typically to use koha? So medium, right? That's the sweet spot, it seems. A lot of small libraries too, 30% compared to 55, large, and then very large. So those are the same categories I use in lots of my other reports. So again, this kind of rings true. What's the sweet spot of any given system? They're reaching into the large and very large, and expect to see more of that. When you look at open source in general, so this is using any open source system, or at least the ones that I track, Koha, Evergreen, and Folio. How has it shifted over the years? In 2020, and these are slides I took from the slide deck I gave at a previous CoaCon conference, 84% were using a proprietary system. Now it's 80, so there's been a 5% loss in proprietary systems. Koha has gone from 10.4% up from 6.9%. So over 5 years, there's been an increment, right? It's not night and day, but incremental growth, and that is a good thing, right? It's not going down. In academic libraries, gone from 92% 5 years ago to 83 now, so almost 10% difference, right? And going to Koha, not so much Evergreen, but some, and then Folio. Folio is developed for academic systems. It's not surprising to see that more of them are using that. I hear there's this little library called the Library of Congress. They went live on Folio a month ago. So it's competition, and it's not. I think that, in this space, you collaborate, you compete. Sure, you want to put your system in as many libraries as you can, but it's also a win, I think, if you're in the open source community, when a library goes with another open source system, because it shows that the concept and the community and the collaboration, those values that I mentioned are increasing. US public, I think I already said that, didn't I? So it's gone from 84 down to 80 proprietary systems, and up 10% from 6.9% in 5 years in the academic libraries, in public libraries. Just a couple of things from other places. The UK open source has gone from 5.5% to 6.9%, so a smaller increment, but progress nonetheless. Okay, UK public, similar story, 1% difference. So libraries in the UK are different, of course, and have different assumptions than those. Most of them go through kind of larger procurement processes, more difficult procurement processes, and the public library funding in the UK is not great right now. Lots of public libraries are closing, going to volunteer run organizations and so forth, so it's not a pretty picture. And then UK academic, I didn't have that previous slide, but you can see that 80% proprietary systems and 19%, and Koha is just, Folio is just getting started there. Okay, so another interesting thing to think about is that of all the different systems out there, what are libraries choosing to implement? So here you can see that Koha is 8.6%. Am I pointing? Yeah. So there are 1,459. Does that number sound right? Which is respectable. And it's important to look at those over time. And I do this anyway for even the proprietary systems to kind of see the shifts. For new implementations, what are people choosing? So when you look at installed base, that's kind of how things are now, but it's also important to look at, if you're looking for a system, what is the system that you're choosing now? And those numbers are quite a bit different. I think we'll see, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but a higher percent of those are koha than it used to be. And when you look at the balance between Symphony, Polaris, and Sierra, those numbers are really in play too. Anybody can ask questions as we go along too. I want to do all the talking. And then academic libraries, you can see that the same kinds of dynamics are happening. Alma is by far the dominant system for especially large academic libraries. This is all libraries. If you look at the ARLs, for example, you can see that there's a very small or a much smaller number of systems that are being deployed. And Folio is up there as far as new selections. Folio and all. I think Alma is still ahead as far as new selections, but Folio is right behind. It used to be that World Share Management System from OCLC was the main challenger to Alma. Now it's Folio. So that's quite a difference in dynamic just in the last 3 or 4 years. And migration patterns. So this is counting all years. So if you're using koha to, what system did you have before you came to koha? That's the kind of question. So when this kind of looks a little familiar for what I was saying before, that of all the libraries in the US that are using koha, where did they come from? And you can see the largest, not the largest, but a large number was this previous version of koha, and Biblium koha. And I'm not sure how bibliovation, and bibliovation is also there separately. So when you count bibliovation and liblime as one thing, then that makes the number even more. And you can see that a large number came from Symphony. I have another story. Story is this. So Circe Corporation acquired Dynex. Dynex had acquired DRA. So there's this big merger that happened to form Circe Dynex. I could spend an hour talking about that history, but I won't. And so when Circe and Dynex came together, they were owned by a few VC firms, but then in, what year was it? 2003, 5, I forget when they were acquired by Vista Equity Company. And so this was kind of the first time that a private equity company gained traction in the library space. So they'd acquired other tech companies, but there's the first exposure to libraries. And so they had this bright idea that why does this company have 3 or 4 different ILS products? They had Unicorn, as Symphony was called then. They had Horizon, which they had acquired. They had Corinthian/Horizon 8, which was a new system they were building. And then they had lots of other kind of legacy implementations of other systems that were part of that rollup. But Vista, in their wise business planning, thought one system. All the others, all roads lead to Rome, which was the code name for what became Symphony. And so they announced, if you're on Horizon, you have this much time to get to Symphony. If you have, this will be the only system that we support. And it was a very abrupt business change. So that change was very much disliked in the broader library community. Not only for the other systems besides Symphony that libraries were using, but even for Symphony itself. It was this, they're using that, but now they said, this could happen to us too. So it really was an inflection point where libraries started to question proprietary companies and proprietary products. So that business decision essentially launched the open source ILS movement in the US, because there's a big surge of adoption at that time from all these other systems within the Circe Dynex fold as well as other systems. So that really gave the open source community a jump start. And I forget, had Evergreen already come out by then? I don't remember. Okay, what year was Evergreen started?
Like,
2008, you said. Okay, so that was a little bit before, but so, the open source movement, was really, became a thing because of the lack of trust in the vendor community at that time. And I have to give Cersei Dynamics credit that they eventually found their way better. That they were able to kind of get control of the company's future and say that this decision was horrible. We're losing business, and then that led to them, even though this bridge under the water on the bridge by then, saying that we will support Horizon just as much as Symphony. You don't have to worry about it. Well, and they've pretty much stayed true to that. They continue to support and develop more or less on Horizon as well as Symphony. But more importantly, they came up with this Blue Cloud web layer on top of both of them, so they could then do development supported both. But has that really worked out for them? You can look at numbers over time to see what their momentum is in retaining and winning new sites. And it's good, but not great. Okay. So when you look at this year, well, the last full year of data, 2024, so if you picked koha then in that 1 year, so this is 1 year's worth of data. So you can see that even today, large numbers of libraries choosing koha are coming from Symphony. Verso, ILS from Auto Graphics, a company that was recently sold, they're losing some Sierra Polaris. So when koha is able to take away from the big leagues, the systems from the larger commercial companies developed for larger libraries, you can see that's good progress. 4 from Polaris went to Symphony, to koha last year, and 5 and 13 from Symphony. So it kind of measures the strength of a system. How are you able, who are you able to attract from? Verso was probably the weakest system there. Autographics had a great resource sharing system, but their ILS was not doing well. I was shocked when I did the library systems report, having data for that. So for calendar year 2024, 0 sales of Verso or Share It. I had to ask them, do you really mean this? Yeah, no. And so then it's not surprising that later the year that they were sold. Okay. So win and loss rate. So no matter what system you have, whether, you're going to lose some sites over time, and are you winning more? That's the hope. If you're losing more than you're winning, that's not good. So just to pick on a company that has seen some challenges in retaining customers, look at Library.Solution from the Library Corporation, you can see they're definitely losing more than they're gaining. And then you look at koha, gaining a lot, losing very little. So I don't think there's any system that can say we've never lost a customer, but if the numbers here are small, the retention rate, is good. You want that. You want to be able to have libraries know that if they pick this system, it's going to be with them for a long time. And then in my perception survey, what are folks looking at? They kind of give some counts there. You can see that a lot are thinking about moving to koha in the future, 54 compared to 69 for folio and so forth. More detailed numbers there. Don't want to spend a lot of time looking at it. But then I think I'm winding down to satisfaction scores, where you can see that overall, perceptions, and this is just asking, it's not based on anything other than, what do I think about the support that I'm getting? It's not, I don't ask them to make it statistically objective or anything. How do you feel about your system? How do you feel about the support you're getting? And you can see that over time, koha in general has gone up and up and up. And the thing about these charts is that, I'm using Google Visualization API to be able to spin out the charts. And so it does automatic scaling. I've got another version where I control the scaling, but in this version, you can see that even though it looks like it's climbing the charts, it's still at 7.78. So a lot of progress and at a high level, but it's not at 9. 9 is the top. And you look at Bywaters, the chart doesn't look as good, but you got to notice that the number's the same in the end, almost exactly the same. So when you're, they've obviously done some things to improve service over time. And you also think about the thing that I said earlier, that bigger and bigger libraries are implementing koha. And the larger your library, the more likely it is that at any given time, there's something wrong, right? When you're a small library, it works for you. There are features that we don't use. I hear that they're not working well, but when you're a larger library, you're exercising all the functionality, and you're always going to have something going on. So as Bywater has taken on larger customers, their challenge to have perceived, support is harder. But you can see that it's still working out well, even though the chart seems messier. So I always try to be careful to make sure that people are looking at the actual numbers and not the change over time alone. I like, this here where the change over time is upward. That's good. But there's also a more detailed picture when you look at specific support arrangements. Evergreen, likewise, almost exactly the same satisfaction score, even though, it's been a little bit messier over the years. So just throw that in for perspective, even though we're here to talk about koha. Folio, the same story applies, that the main factor here is what I just said. Folio is used by the largest of libraries. So, it's not surprising that every little feature, doesn't work for every library as expected, because, when you're being implemented by a large ARL, there's always something wrong. And, it would be unrealistic to think that it would be a lot higher. I expect it should be a little bit higher. It's gone down as larger libraries implement. I don't have Alma's figures on the chart, but you can see that they're complicated as well, but they're pretty good. Okay. How am I doing on time? I'm past time, right? I'm good till when?
20 minutes.
Oh, good. I forgot when I started. But I hope we have time to talk about this especially. So, wish I could see my version better. So as we've seen through the data, and all of my thoughts about any system are informed by the data I collect. I collect data from you guys, who's using what system and what. I use the perceptions report to see how you feel about the system, how it's working for you. I get data from vendors that tell me how their sales are doing year by year. So I get lots and lots of data coming in so that I have, I hope, a broad perspective about how each of these systems are doing. And there are a lot of them. I mean, it's hard enough to keep track of koha, but I have to keep track of all of the other systems in the same kind of level and be backed by the same kind of data. So we see that koha is doing well. Its perception of satisfaction is doing well. It's seeing new customers come on every year. It's losing very few. So all good indicators. The size of libraries that are implementing koha, and Aspen discovery, especially in the public library side, is going up pretty well. When this inflection point I talked about with open source, at the time I asked myself, what's next here? And is it going to be this kind of hockey stick adoption where everybody suddenly realizes that this is the right path for public libraries? Or will it be incremental? Well, it's incremental, right? It's gone up pretty well, and just incremental progress is a good thing. But when you look at one of the few examples where I think it's more of a hockey stick style migration was like Alma versus Symphony. When Alma came on the market, its implementation was fast and furious. So I've seen examples of both, and over time, the incremental progress in koha has been a very good thing, a very positive direction. But the numbers are still more libraries are using proprietary systems than open source systems in all sectors of the US. I'm going to say something else, but what is there to say? That's the state of things. My question is, well, when I think about what it takes to move up more and faster, the example of that, as I mentioned, was Alma, where a completely new system, new architecture, new thinking, new design, based on the needs of a particular type of libraries, that seemed to work. The other thing that made it work is that there was no migration path, right? There were, it's not that if you're using Voyager or Aleph, that you magically become part of the Alma platform at some point. The part being that they continue to develop and support Alma and Voyager just as much as they've been doing all along, but they had a separate development effort to create this new next generation system that worked, that resonated. To say worked is maybe an overstatement, but it resonated with a particular community libraries. So this is, take it with like the biggest bag of salt, grain of salt from me, because I'm not part of your community. But, what will koha be like 10 or 15 years from now? Will its current code base and platform be satisfying to its audience, its community, in 10 years, in 15 years? Will Perl Plaque and the whole code base, will that be the way that libraries want to consume technology in this more distant future? So is there an opportunity now to begin thinking about, well, what would next generation koha look like? What would be a platform that developers that hosting providers and service providers could more efficiently support, and that could deliver broader, richer functionality? Not that it's not good now, but who knows what the needs will be a decade from now. So, I mean, that's the thought that I kind of think about occasionally is, what is next for koha? It's probably harder and harder to get programmers that do Perl. I know there are plenty. I don't think there's ever been a shortage of folks to hire that know Perl and PHP. And I love Perl, but if I was building a new system today, I certainly wouldn't write it in Perl. I'd have somebody else write it. It wouldn't be me. But that kind of thing. So, I encourage you to think far into the future to make sure that this incremental progress is sustained, and that what will actually move the needle faster as far as improving interest in koha over time and satisfying the libraries that choose to use koha 10 years from now. So I'm interested in hearing your thoughts about that. And that's my last slide. So we're now have time to talk among yourselves. So questions, comments? Here.
Just a quick question on the large versus very large.
Actually, for the sake of the people online. could
Yeah, is there a
somebody
roving
get
mic?
Microphone here, talking.
And if not, I can repeat the questions.
Never turn it on. Open the battery or.
Size. The screen. Yeah.
Here, can I steal your lab for a moment?
Yeah, do that. Well, do that and then bring it back in.
Like that now. I just wanted to know what the difference between large and very large libraries is in that one pie chart.
You would ask. It's based on the number of volumes managed by the library. There are a lot of factors, right? For public libraries, what's the population served, what's the size of the collection, number of staff members and all of that. So one metric I try to make sure is in most of the records is how large the collection is. So it's that. And so very large between academic and public libraries are different, right? To be a very large academic library, you've got to have, I think, more than 10 million volumes, and most public libraries don't have that. And I think it's 1 million for publics. I would have to look at my coding to remind myself, but yeah. I mean, a public library that has 500,000 volumes is pretty big. So what's the next level up? Probably over 1 million. That makes sense?
Yeah, items versus bibs, I guess volumes is items.
Volumes. And so some of these numbers are loosely interpreted. I get questions all the time about, this is the number I have, it's the number of bib records, we haven't, it's the number of item records, the number of volumes. But these are meant to be ballpark. Yeah, mostly for the purpose of making these distinctions. The needs between all these different categories of libraries are substantial. There's a ILS called Apollo that's used by very small public libraries. They get top ratings on my survey every year. And you look at the system, the functionality is not sophisticated and the catalog isn't beautiful. A friend of mine once, for a small library, said that it's not that the bear could dance well, it's that it could dance at all. It meets their needs. So the threshold is higher and higher with larger libraries. When you talk about nuances of how serial records are handled, versus another system that, what are serials? And we don't have a serials module. So the questions get harder as the library gets bigger. Nate.
Speak into this tiny microphone. Thank you. Hello. I have a comment about the adoption question that you brought up and a question for you. So my comment about adoption, I think that you're going to see incremental growth continue within Koha instead of that hockey puck that you're seeing, or hockey stick that you're seeing with Alma and Folio, mainly because of the funding behind the commercial entities that support these products. You've got Clarivate, $3 billion a year, and they're dumping every penny they have into pushing Alma into every academic library in the country.
They're putting it into development, Alma? Go ahead.
Yeah, and sales, though. I mean, they've got a gigantic sales force. Same with EBSCO. EBSCO is in every library in the country. So every conversation that EBSCO has is Folio, Folio, Folio. You don't have that kind of backing for Koha. Bywater doesn't have 2,000 salespeople. We put all of our investment into managing the product, not selling it. And we're going to continue to do that. So I think that's the difference between what you see when you see these small grassroots open source companies supporting these products that were developed by librarians, as opposed to very large corporate entities supporting open source products that were developed by large corporate entities. So yeah, I think we're in great shape. Yeah. We don't want the hockey stick. We like general organic growth, so that we can grow with our partners and with the software. My question for you, you've been observing and involved in many different communities, both open source and proprietary. The Koha community has a pretty established governance system that's a combination of libraries and vendors. I wanted to ask if you saw any difference between communities that do not have any vendor involvement in governance and ones that do, and if there's any pluses or minuses between those two approaches.
So there's a lot of different ways to slice and dice it, right? So the governance models between koha, evergreen, and koha are all different. I would say that, and tell me if my thinking about it is wrong, koha seems more informal. It's collaboration among vendors, understanding that there won't be forks in the code, that, different kind of motivators to get companies and individuals to contribute.
Can I hand you this before it falls on the ground?
Oh, I thought it was in my pocket. So one is that I don't think that we can say based on experience there's any right way to govern an open source project because we see three different models of success in play. Folio is much more vendor driven. Evergreen, Galen can talk more about. Koha has been globally successful. There are support vendors that write code together every day, Libre, among others. And so that works.
Was Olay structured? How was that?
It was run by committee.
So that was all library run.
Yeah,
And what were the pitfalls in that?
being run by committees. No, it was, there were some poor, no, not poor. There were good technology decisions made that turned out to be bad. Like the alliance with Koali for the rice infrastructure layer that Koali eventually withdrew support for. So they had built a system on top of something based on faith that it would endure. And then Koali essentially became commercial and withdrew support for others to use rice. So unless they wanted to become a Koali affiliate in a very close way, they had to essentially find a new path, and it was far too late. So it lost its momentum, and Folio was a good second chance. So I don't think that the governance model for Olay can be considered a success because the project wasn't a success. So yeah, and what you were saying about marketing is important, that Koha is never going to have a global marketing company support. It's got to sell itself. It's got to sell itself, right? And it does sell itself. It's gotten where it is because, the biggest thing about the way that libraries select systems is based on their colleagues and references and all of that. And that's where I hope my website plays an important role, is that if you're successful, it's reflected in the way that my data supports, right? So I think it's sure the global marketing has something to do with it. If you're buying this content from us, you might as well, we'll give you a deal on technology as well. And that applies both for EBSCO and Clarivate. So they're always going to, well, they're likely to continue to be big players for a long time. Things could change. And also there's a lot of pushback with companies from those products from those companies, because libraries don't necessarily resonate with kind of the big company that also collects data and who knows what happens with it and all those kind of things. So in a way, not having that kind of baggage can be a plus.
That's why they use the co-op vendors to get the launch pad off to get library commerce.
Yeah. So. I'm not, say that again.
So when Folio first came out, EBSCO partnered very closely with all the vendors who support koha
Yes.
to try and get rid of that negative
Mhm.
perception.
Yeah.
And then they stopped partnering with those libraries.
Yeah.
Companies, you know,
Yeah.
once that perception had been.
Yeah, so, what's EBSCO is, you have to commend them for going the open source route, that they did it in a pretty controlled way from a business point of view. But for them, it was a bold move. They had never been involved in developing open source. They had partnered with all the ILS companies, and I would say the reason they did it was because of EDS. At that time, and even now, EDS is their flagship product. And so is this something to be paying attention to? Oh, sounded like a fire alarm. So every ILS, COA, Sierra, or whatever, they wanted it to support EDS because EDS was their flagship. And the reason they got into Folio, in my personal and official opinion, was to support EDS because Alma was doing so well, and every Alma site meant that somebody was either moving from EDS to Primo or from something else to Primo. So it was either a real loss or a potential loss in their EDS sales, which, as you're a database company, is the center of the universe. So that's my main my reason that I see them jumping into Folio. Do they care about the ILSs? No. But they needed them, and they still do.
Last time I came out here and the mic, I kneeled for a long time. I'm too old for that. So I just wanted to say that, oh, you want me to hold this? Okay, you don't want to stay there. Come on, guy. People have been saying that Perl might go away for a very long time. So at this point, we still do not expect Perl to go away. But the Koha community is working on things towards the future, looking ahead to new technologies and infrastructures. Containerization, Hypnotoad, what other things did I say? Vue and using Vue.js so that we really just need an API. We're kind of moving to that. So just to, in case anybody was really worried about that, there are still Fortran programmers out there actively being paid. So Perl's going to be here for a while.
I start off with Fortran.
What's that?
I start off with Fortran.
There you go.
About COBOL.
I haven't done COBOL, but those are the highest programmers around, high-state programmers, because banks use COBOL and they really worry when their systems are in trouble. And of course, we know about the US government when the new folks came in and saw COBOL code and didn't understand it a bit.
Hi.
So, but I think my observation still applies. That right now, yes, that you can do incremental things with a Perl-based system to make it perform better and make it look a little bit more like a modern system through containerization and the other infrastructure technologies that you mentioned. And it somewhat simplifies deployment and maintenance of thousands of sites. But is it the final solution? So, I would never rewrite my site because, I'm highly constrained, right? I'm just one person, but, I just encourage you to think about it. And my feelings aren't gonna be hurt if the strategy continues to be incremental, but my job is to make you think about things. What are the options? What is the future? How are we gonna be successful 10, 20, 30 years from now? So I gave the 10-year benchmark, but take that to 20 years.
Just past time, I handed the mic up for one more question, but if you're sitting on another question, I'm sorry, you've missed your chance.
And so I'll be here rest of the day. I leave tomorrow morning, so I'll be around at the conference, so there'll be other chances to chat if you want to.
Hi. I'm at the Hotchkiss School in Lakeville, Connecticut. We've been users with Bywater for about a decade. When we initially made that decision, we were choosing between OCLC's World Management and migrating from III Millennium to their Sierra program. And I think what ended up happening, not only because of the way that Bywater did their presentation, but also because, I mean, III was going to be 5 figures, almost mid 5 figures, and they were not. And our CFO highly recommended we not spend mid 5 figures for the next iteration. And we've had people leave our organization since then, and there have been several of those people who have ended up in a library where they have tried to affect change by changing out from something like, for instance, one of our ladies ended up as the director of a little tiny library in Amenia, New York, and she's part of the Mid-Hudson library system and attempted to try to change them out from III. But the hindering factor was the woman who is in charge of their ILS for their whole Mid-Hudson library system was reticent to change because she had been with III the entirety of her career. And I think that that's the big hurdle for a lot of places that want to change over, is that when they are with now, like I would be reticent to switch from Koha. I'd literally tell people I would quit because I had III for the first 10 years of my career. I've had it for the second 10 years of Koha. And to migrate to something else is a big hurdle, especially when you're in the end of your career. And I don't know what anybody else feels about that sort of thing, but I mean, the thing that I have seen that has been better for us with regard to this versus III has been there's a promise and an opportunity for progress, and you have a say in that progress, as opposed to you telling somebody at a company and they're just like, oh, that's great. And then there's crickets, and you never know when something might get changed or might be improved. So, I feel like as people of us in this group, if we can sort of help with sales by talking to other library folks who are using systems they may or may not be happy with and trying to convince them that a Koha system is a better option, not only economically, but also for our own sanity. Maybe that's how we move this ball down the court.
Yeah, all great points. It's consistent with what I said earlier, that the system has to sell itself, right? Word of mouth, as librarians talk to librarians, what's working for you, what's not breaking your convention. Other thing to think about is resource sharing and collaborative networks. Is that there's a lot of both open source, but especially proprietary consortia based on proprietary software that have a lot of resource sharing built into that community, that consortium. And so it's not just that, well, my little library, this consortia is just to make something up based on Polaris. I want to change to Koha. So that means you lose the collaboration, even though you're happier about your ILS. So that's you see that happen rarely, where a single library will pull out of a consortia in order to go a different direction, either because they're not getting support from the consortia, they don't like the system, whatever, but then that library is then kind of on their own. So how are the ways that kind of whole networks have the chance to move to open source systems and that kind of thing? Because you get a bigger bang for your buck, and collaboration, resource sharing is more and more important now than it's ever been. Because libraries have less funding, less certain funding, live in a more uncertain world. So there are a lot of those other factors that make libraries stay where they are too. So how can you give them both? Okay, I think I have to stop. So it's been great speaking with all of you. This has been a fun conversation, and I hope it's been somewhat useful to you.